Well, good morning again. So I could start off telling you what the initials mean at the end of my name, but if I was wearing that outfit, you wouldn't hear anything about what I had to say, and you'd probably be heading for the door and going to another session. This outfit sends stronger messages than my degrees, my licenses, or my experience. Like it or not, everything we do sends a message. Everything we say or don't say sends a message. Silence sends a message too. Our decision about what time of day or night that we send messages or communicate, that sends a message. The method that we use, email, in person, or phone, that sends a message too. And some people think that effective communication only matters for people like me giving a speech, or perhaps just for leaders. But effective communication skills are important for everyone because, like it or not, we are always interacting and communicating with others. And as I said in the plenary session, in each interaction, you are interacting with others and developing either trust or distrust chips. So, effective communication is truly key to influencing others, and it's a key to your success. And people often fail to realize that communication is truly an art, and it's the key to influence, persuasion, and success. And frankly, as you move higher and higher in your organization, or as a leader in as you move up to leadership positions, your understanding of effective communication is going to, and strategically using that information, is going to help you more and take you farther than any of your degrees, any of your licenses, or even your experience. So, I'm going to talk about how women communicate and the challenges they face first. And I've given this talk to many women's group. And I promise for the men in the room that I'm going to talk about the challenges that men face. But for the men and the women here, hear what the challenges are for the other, because you are interacting or perhaps leading people who are not like you. So, understanding the challenges that women face in the workplace really is as important for men and women, so that men can be effective leaders. So, women are still challenged by norms and other factors that derail us and hinder our ability to powerfully influence others. So what do I mean? For example, when behaving or speaking the same, men and women are given different labels. A man is viewed as commanding. A woman is viewed as demanding. He's assertive. She's aggressive. He strategizes. She manipulates. A man is a perfectionist. A woman, she's a pain in the ass. Show of hands. Anybody see this happen in your workplace? Okay, all the time? Perhaps, are any of the men willing to raise their hands on that one? See it as well? Well, anger and contempt are often acceptable emotions for men, but when women display those emotions, they're viewed as irrational. In fact, a survey by the Center for Creative Leadership found that women were twice as likely to be branded bossy by exhibiting the same behaviors as their male counterparts. In other words, they were branded bossy even though their behavior wasn't actually any different than the men. And their findings also showed that bossy women were predicted to be less likable and less successful in the workplace than bossy men. Some assertive women try to counter this by softening the message, but when you do that, you just reduce its effectiveness. And perhaps some of you feel frustrated or even angry about the two sets of rules for men and women in the workplace. So I will say a lot of progress has been made for women in the corporate world or in organizations such as yourself. The way in which women communicate and seek to influence, however, continues to be judged by different standards than for men. We have to walk a different or a tighter tightrope than men. Now, when I've given this speech to groups that are largely comprised of women, I've had women stand up and say, I don't think I should change at all. Men should change. The organization should change. Companies should change. And I agree that work is perhaps needed by men or corporations or organizations, but I prefer to take matters into my own hands. I prefer to take control over what I can control. I'm in charge of my professional success, and so can you. So, while I find it more empowering to take these matters into my own hands, so if any of you out there feel angry about the fact that there's two sets of rules, rather than get mad, I suggest you make lemonade. So what do I mean by that? Before going back to school and getting my Master of Counseling degree, I was a trial lawyer, as reflected in my bio, and I tried cases around the country for national and international companies. And oftentimes, the client would give me their case, and it looked like a bowl of lemons, sometimes a barrel of lemons. And on behalf of the auto manufacturers, sometimes 50 million lemons, like really 50 million lemons. But my clients didn't pay me to point out that fact to them. So I didn't spend much time getting mad or staying angry. That's a waste of time. And it's not what my clients paid me to do. So I gathered my team together to focus on and developing the best strategy. So creating lemonade out of lemons requires intentional focus and energy. So don't waste time wishing they were something other than the lemons you were handed. So for those of you who are frustrated or angry about the two sets of rules, I want to talk to you and have you consider the benefits of moving past your anger. And remember, the goal line is your success. So a little background before we get to strategies, and then and before I get to talking about the challenges men face. So most of us know that there's not just one style of communication. There's the passive side and the more aggressive side, although most of us tend toward the middle, but I'm going to talk about both ends. And when I'm talking today, I'm going to give you some strategies if you tend toward one side or the other. So at one side of the spectrum, nice girls. These people have been raised to be nice, people pleasers. They communicate in a way that undermines their credibility and confidence. And they'll tell themselves, I'm not going to speak up. Somebody will say it instead of me, or it's already been said before, or hopefully someone will say it and I won't need to. So these types of women, they go with the flow, even at their own expense, and they rarely speak up. And while they quietly wait to get noticed, others are getting noticed, promoted, and getting the opportunities that they truly deserved. And then there's the other side, the assertive side. At the other end, some of these women have stepped up and spoken in assertive or straightforward ways. Well, they're viewed as bossy or bitchy. They're considered aggressive, overly ambitious, self-promoting, not a team player. Have any of you had any of those labels used for you, either directly or behind your back? Okay, I'm hearing laughter. It sounds like this is something that's happened. Okay. So, according to a 2017 survey, when senior level women negotiate for promotions and salary increases, they're far more likely to be labeled intimidating, aggressive, or bossy than male counterparts doing exactly the same thing. So the outcome for these folks, whether you're on either side, is that they're passed over for promotion or opportunities for significant visibility, which would give them the experience they need for the next step. They're often ignored and viewed as not a leader. So a great deal of research, in fact, study after study, over the decades, women face a double bind in the workplace. This means that women who exhibit female or nice are viewed as altruistic, nurturing, people pleasers. And on the other side, in the people pleasers are viewed as not good leaders. But on the other side, if a woman acts too masculine, they're viewed as independent, competitive, unlikable, bossy, and bitchy. And the research bears that out. So there's been a lot of proposed solutions, and I want to talk to you about those. And I promised them, and I'm going to get to you too. So the first one is ban bossy. So Sheryl Sandberg, CEO of Facebook, said, let's fix the problem and ban the word bossy on playgrounds. Because if we do that, then girls will grow up feeling strong and confident. And so she got together with Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice and the head of Girl Scouts, on Anna Marie Chavez, to do that. So they recommend let's ban it, and girls will grow up differently. And then there's the embrace the B word. So Tina Fey, you all know her, she had a different solution. So she encouraged women to embrace the name calling. So when Hillary Clinton was running for president the first time in 2008, she did a skit on Saturday Night Live, as she's prone to do. And she said, let me say something. Hillary is a bitch. Bitch is the new black. Bitches get stuff done. Okay? So even Supreme Court Ruth Bader Ginsburg has embraced the word bitch. She said when she found out that she was called bitch at Harvard Law School, she embraced it by saying, better bitch than mouse. Make sense? Others have said rise above it, get over it, don't take it, ignore it, don't take it personally, don't try to be liked by everyone. So these folks tell people, lean in, take charge, ignore the naysayers and the attacks. In other words, suck it up and just do it. Well, let me tell you, this well-meaning advice to suck it up and just do it from female leaders is necessary. I agree with that. But I think it's insufficient to move the needle for you or your organization. And I have a different approach that I bring you today that's based on my experience as a managing partner of the Phoenix office of a law firm, as well as my research and experience as an executive coach. So, suck it up, just do it. It's necessary, but not sufficient. I think it takes a lot more in the long haul to be successful. And we're going to get to that in a moment. But let's talk about the challenges for men, the ones that they feel, that they experience, before taking a deeper dive into strategies for communication effectiveness. So when male leaders behave badly or speak aggressively, they're given the B label, bully. Has anybody heard that label given to aggressive men? See a lot of nods of heads. Okay. Has anyone, just as a show of hands, seen a man pay the price for engaging in bullying behaviors? Have they been fired? Any show of hands? Okay. Not promoted? Any? Show of hands? Any? A little? No? Maybe not so much? Okay. Well, this is what I found. I did some research about the price men pay. You don't see anything, do you? Right. Shocking. So I said, skip the peer-reviewed research. I'll just Google it. This is what I found. In fact, what I found was statements like how to talk to your man. It's really surprising. So I did more research, and I did find in a 2014 study, 20% of male bullies lost their jobs when bullying men, and 17% when bullying women. Interestingly, the targets of their bullying lost their jobs at the rates of 80 and 83% of the time. But this does indicate to you that men do pay a price. But are those blank slides, does that for the women feel kind of like how it feels in the workplace? Show of hands. Any? Okay. Yeah. Well, the study didn't look at whether the men were not promoted because of their bullying behavior. But I suspect in this litigious environment, there are a lot of men who are passed over for promotion by engaging in bullying behavior. And I certainly saw that in my office. There were certain people who could not and would not become managing partners of our office because of their behavior. So, bottom line, men don't get a free pass for aggressive behavior or ineffective work styles in the workplace. More importantly, this is where I think things might change in the future. I think that when male leaders fail to tame their temper, they're going to pay a bigger and bigger price. And there's like 4 reasons I think that's going to happen. Today we have more of a see something, say something culture. And that's not just for criminals and terrorists. And in fact, there was a survey released just in May of this year, which found that 38% of employees have spoken up or criticized their employer over social issues such as gender inequality. There are employee activists that are growing in all of the organizations, and I think Amazon just had some evidence of that related to some of the social issues they face. And I also think, and maybe it's just me, but I think the Me Too movement has sparked more than a conversation than just sexual harassment. I think it's encouraged more women to step up and stop overlooking bad behavior generally. Additionally, as more and more women not only enter the workforce, but move up in leadership, notions about aggressive behavior of men is less likely to be acceptable. Finally, you're all leaders in the court systems, and you have to influence and persuade others over whom you have little or no control. So B-word behaviors and communication techniques, whether as a man or a woman, might prevent you from influencing others and achieving your goals. So what do I mean? So, in your role, you need to interact with, influence, and persuade, and lead stakeholders who have varying degrees of autonomy, yet connection to the court system. Line judges, presiding judges, clerks, funders of the court system, appellate courts, the state bar, attorneys, the public who uses the court. So does anybody in this room have to influence or persuade the folks that are like this? Anybody working? Okay, most of you. And it's likely that you have to persuade and influence them even though you have no say over their hiring or firing or setting of their salaries. So what this means for you is that in your role, you need to influence and lead others who are not dependent upon you for much, if anything. For example, you may have no control over the funding of your court system or the other way around. So your leadership and your power is useless unless you find ways to effectively influence and persuade others to implement decisions, facilitate change, and accomplish your goals. So in your current roles, your power largely relies on your soft skills, your personal characteristics, your interpersonal relationships, your behaviors and strategies. And I'd like, again, for you to think about them as tools. So, whether you're a man or a woman, when it comes to communication styles, there's kind of a spectrum, okay? On the one side is the passive, whether you're a male or a female. These types of individuals have developed a pattern of avoiding expression of opinions or feelings, protecting their own rights, failing to protect their own rights, or even meeting their own needs. Obviously, at the other end of the spectrum are the aggressive. And these people express feelings and opinions and advocate for their needs in a way that violates the rights of others. And aggressive communicators are often verbally and physically abusive. So, what do I propose? Balance. I'm recommending balancing strength and style by being a strategic and assertive, not aggressive, an assertive communicator, which is a style where an individual clearly states their opinions, their feelings, and firmly advocates for their beliefs and their rights without violating the rights of others. So my goal today is to identify those strategies and skills to be considered and then tailored for your organization. And I get that I'm talking to a very wide audience. Some of you folks work in rural court systems, some in urban. Some of you folks have just a few people in your court system where you can walk down the hall. Others are spread over many buildings, districts, and miles apart. And they're large urban ones. So you need to tailor what I'm saying for your own audience, your own culture, etc. Also, you need to tailor it to yourself. It's important for you to be authentic. I could never walk and talk like the big male leaders and trial partners in my old firm who would stand around and do one of these. I'm just not big enough for that. So you really need to be authentic. And some of these things I'm going to talk about you can implement right away. Others you need to think about and integrate. But I want you to think about these as tools to make strategic and wise choices about how you communicate, behave, and think. So we can do that by balancing strength and style toward strategic assertiveness. So there are actually 7 steps towards strategic assertiveness. Some of them we've already covered, and I'm not going to cover it again. We're not going to cover old ground. But I am going to focus on executive presence, one aspect of emotional intelligence that I didn't cover this morning. Again, there's 15 subscales, and we're just going to cover one more here. And then talk very specifically about some communication techniques with what I call grab-and-go strategies. Again, maybe some scripts that you can consider using or tailoring to your own thing, to your own needs. And again, some of these are going to feel like good reminders. Yeah, I really ought to do that. I heard somebody else say I shouldn't react to my wife. I should reflect back her feelings. Same thing for teenagers, although they probably aren't listening anyway. But I'd like to encourage you to think about these as real tools so that you can make the wisest choices. Okay. The first area for today is executive presence. A leader with executive presence has the ability to command the attention of others. They demonstrate confidence. They remain composed even under great stress. They inspire and compel others to hear their message. So many executives consider their subject matter expertise, remember those degrees and licenses, more important. But executives don't become great leaders with just a bunch of initials and licenses behind their name. It has to do with this executive presence, that amorphous, kind of hard to put your finger on types of qualities that separate or distinguish subject matter experts from leaders others will walk through fire with or for. Indeed, executive presence can be more powerful than the message itself. So what is executive presence? It's how you move, stand, and occupy space. In general, it tends to reflect your comfort level in a room. It reflects your passion and enthusiasm and authenticity. How do you stand? How do you introduce yourself? Achieving executive presence requires very strategic decisions about how you look, speak, and behave. When you step into the room, people are making judgments about you, like how confidently you walk in, how confidently do you shake their hand and look them in the eye. So you can work with a trusted colleague or a coach or a friend or even a spouse, but you can get feedback on a variety of these things. So let me start with appearance. So I know appearance sounds very cliche. I get that. But it's not. It is actually, whether someone hears your message is largely determined by how you look. It depends, how you look will influence whether they like you and whether your message will be heard. Remember that outfit I showed you at the beginning? If I was wearing that and I stood here, you'd be gone. And it's true. If you show up dressed like for a nightclub or a tailgate party, then the office, you're not going to be invited to the executive boardroom, no matter how smart or how well prepared you are. And this advice isn't just for women. Mark Zuckerberg wore what's called an I'm sorry suit when he testified before Congress. And he did that intentionally and strategically. He did not show up in his T-shirt, his trademark T-shirt and jeans, and he did that on purpose. He did it to say to the Congress, I'm in your house right now. I'm playing by your rules right now. And so it was sort of an olive branch to Congress. Now, I get that wearing a suit and tie didn't fix Facebook's problems, and they're not fixed today. But it did remove some level of criticism that he might have had leveled at him during those hearings had he shown up in his T-shirt and jeans. I taught my daughter at a very young age, what we wear to the beach is different than what we wear to a place of worship, which is different than what we wear to work or school. We dress differently on purpose because how we're dressed sends a message. So let's look at the next thing. How do you sound? Pitch or tone. I know people can't necessarily help this, but a high-pitched or shrill tone can sound like nails on a chalkboard to some people. The Center for Talent Innovation found that the sound of your voice matters twice as much as your message. So get feedback from others. If your voice isn't where it should be, work with a voice coach. Volume. Are you too soft or too loud? Both are going to hamper your ability to persuade and influence others because people either can't hear you or they don't want to hear you. Maybe you consider maintaining a conversational tone no matter what's happening in the situation, even if it kills you. Screaming, yelling, and escalating volume simply increases the likelihood that you're going to get one of those B-word labels, which will not help you be effective as a communicator or a leader. Silence. It can be used very effectively. Perhaps in the middle of a speech to let the audience take in a message. Perhaps if you've noticed public speakers, presidents or others doing speeches there, they'll use silence appropriately to let others take in the message, and it can be powerful. Now, that doesn't mean you take it to the extreme, because some people will use silence, and what ends up happening is they never speak up, which sends the message that you have nothing to say. So that's not what I mean. But do consider silence at appropriate times as a tool in your toolbox. And so be intentional about the ways in which your inflection, your voice, changes in volume, and silence. And these are tools that can be tweaked and modified to your particular audience and for your particular needs. So what do they hear? And I'm going to cover this more in communication, but this makes sense right here. It's important for you to get feedback on what they hear and also do some self-reflection in this area as well. Are you a pit bull who won't let go of an idea? You just keep arguing and arguing your point, caring more about being right and winning than leading will derail your career. And I'm going to talk more about that when I talk about content. But for now, follow Kenny Rogers' advice. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away. Do you speak more than anyone else in the room? Remember, sometimes less is often more, especially when it's well-timed. If you pipe up early and often, it can be very alienated, and it doesn't reflect balance. Over-explaining. So this is people who keep explaining and explaining the same point. It tends to be more of a passive communication style. These people are so afraid of being aggressive or labeled a B word that they talk around and around the message instead of getting to the point. And I'm going to give a script that someone like that can use in a few minutes. So it's a passive communication style where the actual message gets lost. And if you're one of those that over-explain, when you're coming down the hall, they're going to run in the other direction because who has time for that, right? Phrase statements as questions. This is, again, more on the passive side. A lot of people who are too afraid of being called the B word will say a statement in the form of a question like, what do you think about changing the policy to X? Instead of saying, the policy needs to change. Here's why. So it's a passive style that isn't helpful. Feel comfortable asserting yourself, not being aggressive, but making statements where and as appropriate. Rise in the tone at the end of the sentence. This is something that takes probably somebody else sharing with you. When I'm working with leaders or frankly high school students who need it, they often will rise, their sentence will rise at the end. They'd say like, should we change the policy? Or you'd say, I think we should change the policy, like that. And it's a little bit more subtle when you're hearing it. I did it more exaggerated to make my point. But it's a passive style that's not necessarily effective. It is also something very difficult to hear in yourself. So perhaps this is an area where you might need to get some feedback. Okay, behavior. Be present. Sylvia Hewlett, who writes on executive presence, says, to radiate presence, you need to radiate that you are present. So that means being mindful of distractions. When you demonstrate that you're truly present with others, a connection is made, and they'll hear you too. Stance. So presence, executive presence is impacted on how you stand. So this is particularly true. I'm going to step away from the podium here, but hopefully you'll hear me. This is particularly true for women who tend to stand in a weak form. So they'll put one leg behind the other, like this, and stand at a podium. Maybe I should go here. They'll stand like this. And then maybe they'll adjust themselves like this. Or they'll stand like this. Okay. So I'm going to repeat that. So when somebody puts their leg behind the other and stands at a podium, or they put their feet together, like I just demonstrated live, it is a weak style, and it doesn't show that you are commanding presence. It's not executive presence. So it also shows that you're actually smaller than you actually are. So stand straight, feet shoulder width apart, and use your arms as necessary to create largeness. Now, some of you are already on the larger side. Perhaps you don't need to do that, but you can use your arms effectively, but stand shoulder widths apart. And good posture is actually more than just what Mom taught you. Dr. Amy Cuddy, a social psychologist at Harvard Business School, found that by standing like this, or she talks about a power pose where your arms are at your sides, it actually boosts testosterone and lowers cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and it helps you feel more confident and you feel better when speaking. So you can research that. I think it's a TED Talk. You look up Amy Cuddy or Power Pose, you'll see that. So when you want to influence effectively, just remember you're being watched as well as listened to. So for those of you who don't have as much confidence, just stand like that in the bathroom for 15 minutes and then go in and fake it till you make it, okay? So eye contact. Again, I've already touched on this, so I'm going to move ahead. But one aspect I didn't cover earlier is that some people look at the ceiling in answers to questions like this, like God will present the answers. Some look to their floor. And most people who do that, they don't even know they're doing it. So maybe you need to get some feedback, or perhaps you can notice it yourself. If you see the floor and the ceiling more often than you see the person in front of you, you probably have some work to do. Okay, are you one of those people who's disinterested except when you're talking? If you look disinterested or look at your devices while others are talking, we've seen this, they'll do it too when you're talking. So if the goal is to persuade, be present, ditch the distractions, and look at people. And give the other people a chance to speak. And remember, once you hear what's going on in their mind, then you can adjust your message to influence them effectively. Additionally, if you can dial down this disinterest when other people are talking, and more importantly, look interested, you will probably minimize the chances of getting one of those B-word labels. So body postures and gestures, a lot of this you already know. Watch your body postures. Be careful speaking with your arms crossed like this, or when somebody else is speaking, cross your arms. Keep an open posture. So if your goal is to avoid B-word labels, be careful of that kind of posture. Don't furrow your brows. Don't roll your eyes. These are all things Mom probably taught you. I don't need to repeat that. But I will tell you that many people don't realize that they're doing it when they're doing it. So you might need that feedback. Obviously, avoiding threatening gestures like clenched fists and things like that are obvious. That'll get you a B-word label and perhaps a lawsuit. So it can happen now, and you can sometimes lose control. Don't beat yourself up, but you might want to go back and apologize and ask for a do-over. So, again, get some feedback. Embrace the feedback. It's not a personal attack. It's really, truly a gift that somebody can give to you. After this conference, I'm going to listen to, or read, I should say, all of the feedback I get from you folks, because I learn and incorporate that into something else that I do or some other speech that I give. It's important, and it's important in the moment to notice how others respond to you. Okay. Emotional intelligence, I just covered that in the plenary session. I want to cover a different subscale with you here. So again, emotional intelligence is understanding your own emotions, understanding others' emotions, and being able to be strategic and wise with that information. So going back to the scales, I'm going to talk about impulse control, which is part of the decision-making scale, and you can probably see it up there. So the definition of impulse control is the ability to understand the appropriate times and ways to act on emotions and impulses, and the importance of thinking before acting. So some people are low. They're low impulse control. They're hot-headed, explosive, reactive. They have a low tolerance for frustration. Now, these types are the ones that are yelling in traffic, even if no one's listening. They might engage in road rage. At the office, they hit the send button on highly charged emails with a "I'll get you back" mentality. So if you are low in your impulse control and you're one of those people who hit the send button when you shouldn't, it often comes across as hysterical, irrational, unable to effectively communicate or lead. It can derail your career, and it will increase the likelihood that you're going to get a B-word label. And remember, those reputation, 20 years to build, 5 minutes to ruin. So if you tend toward low self-control and have highly charged feelings, I'm not telling you to not notice and not have them. I'm just saying notice it and get control. When you're feeling really upset, take 30 seconds and do some deep breathing before doing or saying anything. If you can, excuse yourself from the situation, if possible, and take a lap around the building. I certainly did when I was managing partner, even at 116 in June. Because it does, when you're angry, you miss the logical part of your brain and you say things you'll later regret. Perhaps you just leave and work elsewhere. Don't know that you can do that and clock out, but if you can, do that. But the most important piece of advice and something you have control over is take your hands off all devices. And I'm going to get to that again later. So if you're high, you hold back on timely action. You lack spontaneity and decisiveness. You probably are seeing someone who's stuck when others need or want action, and you're a barrier to effectiveness. Those types are the analysis paralysis types. So if you have that, consider giving your gut a voice. If your gut is telling you something is wrong, act, don't wait. Perhaps you start with a small decision and then build up your confidence from there. So healthy. Healthy is the middle. They're composed, they're patient, They have the ability to delay or resist impulse. They have a high tolerance for frustration, and they're cool and calm under pressure. So these people can retain flexibility and behave with spontaneity. They tend to think and respond reflexively. They weigh alternatives and assess their options, but they don't wait. But they do pause to consider, what facts do I need to make a decision, and then go get those facts or ask others. Okay. Let me talk to you about when. So what does the time of day or night have to do with effective communication? A lot, because when you communicate sends a message about you. While electronic technology allows you to communicate anywhere, anytime, late night emails cause problems for you and often sends the wrong message. It's important for you to understand the late night emails on others, because research shows that if you are the boss and you send, your best ideas are at 2 a.m. and you send an email that says, hey, I have this great idea, but you don't have to look at it till the morning, or you send it on a Saturday at 10 p.m. because you have nothing better to do, don't worry about that till Monday. Employees do what leaders do, not what they say. So they tend to get burned out. Many of them it will impact their sleep and their productivity the next day because they're already whoopsie. I need some help. Okay, now we're just going to go all the way to where we have it. Sorry about that. Okay. So, if you want to demonstrate balance, I want to give you some information about people's connection to technology by giving you some addiction statistics. So, the research shows 63% say it's harder to go one day without a smartphone than a whole week without their significant other. Real research. Yeah. It's true. I didn't make this stuff up. People find Facebook, email, and Twitter harder to resist than alcohol and cigarettes. Addiction has grown out of this psychological need to be needed, important, connected, and not left out. Many of you heard the term FOMO, fear of missing out. Technology allows us to communicate with freedom and with flexibility, but it causes people to be overwhelmed, overworked, always interrupted, and lacking time to focus. So, I know that this is what the boundaries look like between work and home. And the younger generations tend to like it that way. And so, while it's fuzzy now, I'm not telling you you need to build walls between work and home like the old days when workers in the 50s or 60s punched out and went home. I'm just saying thicken the lines a bit. And here's how. I'm suggesting that there are healthier ways to interact with technology for you and your team. And I'm not saying you have to build those walls, just thicken them. So when you communicate, sends a message about you. You're not influencing people at 2 in the morning at a time when they're not ready to be influenced. So when your goal is to communicate effectively and persuasively, balance, strength, and style. So absent an emergency, after-hours communication says you don't care about the receiver. You might inadvertently create resentment. You look like you're out of control or you lack self-control, and the research shows this. And you might be called the B word. Additionally, if you continue doing that, you'll probably be blamed when they walk out the door and they go to HR and they say it's because of you. Because people need a time to psychologically detach and recover before the next workday. So get control. You control technology, don't let it control you. You set expectation for response time. So perhaps you go back to your organization and say, absent an emergency where we're going to call each other, we're not going to email each other after 6 or after 7. You pick that. And we're not going to email each other about things that can wait till Monday. So you can set those expectation times. And not everything is an emergency, although since you work in the court system and I was a practicing lawyer, I know that a lot of motions are called emergency motions, but they're not. Avoid triaging emails. A lot of people will go through their inbox right before going to bed, but remember, emails are like rabbits. They multiply, okay? What happens is you respond to all of the emails and you're feeling really good. You wake up the next morning and everybody has responded, and your inbox is as full as when you went to bed. So don't triage emails at night. You're more valuable if you're not always available, and I have an asterisk on that and I'll explain. It's a business principle of scarcity. You know, at the holiday times, that $5 toy somehow gets on eBay for $100 because it's not really available? You're the same thing. If you're not always available, then when people actually talk to you or communicate with you or meet with you, they really value that time. So remember to use the principle of scarcity. But don't take that to an extreme. I had a client I was coaching. I tried to set up a meeting. I couldn't get a hold of him, sending emails, calling, nothing, no response. I had to go through HR, the person who hired me as his coach. So I thought, well, maybe he's just resistant to coaching. So I started off our first meeting. So it's having a bit of a challenge getting a hold of you. You didn't get any response to my emails, et cetera. And he said, yeah, so when I get too many emails in my box, I just purge them. Purge them. He has a purge day frequently. And he says, well, if people really want to get a hold of me, I will, they'll just call me again or they'll try again. Well, that does not reflect balance, and it also doesn't reflect effective communication because those people still need their emails answered. So don't take it to the extreme. Deleting emails might eliminate the email, but not the problem. Bottom line, though, late night responses send the wrong message. Never responding at all sends a message that you don't care about the other person's needs or wants. And ignoring the emails doesn't make the problem disappear. So flexible doesn't mean 24/7 available or 3 shifts. Just because we can email everywhere at any time doesn't mean we need to or that we should. And it doesn't mean you email in the morning for a shift before you get to the office, do a shift at the office, and a shift at night. Okay? I'm not saying, though, that you don't have to have great ideas in the middle of the night. Some of you in this room probably do. I'm just saying respect boundaries by using the draft box. And use it so that, or you can program it so it sends it out at 8 in the morning. Having said that, I put an asterisk. That doesn't mean you email your secretary 45 emails at 8:03. That doesn't reflect balance. Okay, method. The way in which we speak, the method that we use, in-person, email, and telephone, sends a message as well. Balancing strength and style requires strategic and intentional decisions about whether to use in-person, by telephone, or by electronic means. So I know that people are increasingly using email or text to communicate, but remember the E in email stands for exhibit. There's my free legal advice, though you folks don't need it. Electronic messages have a greater chance for misinterpretation. We know that. We don't have the paralinguistic cues, like sarcasm in your voice to send an accurate message. It lacks the facial expressions, etc. Additionally, those emails can be shared to people you didn't intend. And this is true for texts as well. It can be posted anywhere, at any time, for years and decades from now. And it might create legal and ethical issues because there's really no freedom of speech in cyberspace. And it might lead to legal and ethical claims or claims of defamation and hostile work environment. So, match the medium with the message. Use in-person meetings or telephone to deliver emotional or sensitive matters. Cultivate relationships and to deliver a lot of information. I don't know if any of you have experienced it, but if you go back and forth by emails, it can take you hours. You could have a 5-minute phone call and take care of everything right away. So consider that. Use emails just to deliver for routine matters, scheduling, or delivering praise or congratulations. And avoid flame mail. Flame mail is a form of electronic rage, and it does not reflect balance. It's an email designed to attack, humiliate, or demean others. And it's usually sent when someone's upset or angry with the, I'll get, for the record is usually how it starts. And it usually escalates problems and never solves them. And it will negatively impact your leadership style and increase the chances you'll be called one of those B words. So, balancing strength and style. While it feels good to hit the send button, if you're angry or upset, take a breath, take your hands off the device. Always. There is never a reason to react to an angry email. Breathe, cool down, and wait before communicating. Don't hit the send button when you're boiling. Because again, we know that we'll say things we later regret. Acknowledge people when you're ready to do it with the most effective method. It could be in person, phone call instead. And there's really never a reason to correct the record because there is no court reporter, right? And never, ever use emails to express feelings or emotions or discuss sensitive topics because remember, they last forever. And don't take the bait ever. Don't respond or don't initiate, but don't respond to an invitation to fight by email. I had that happen to me where a partner 3 doors down was yelling at me by email. I just got up and walked down the hall. And I said, Barry, what's going on? He said, I'm sending you this email. I'm like, dude, I'm here. I'm here. And he said, well, let me finish this email. Okay. And he did. And I stood there. And then we sat and we fixed the problem in 5 minutes. Here's the thing. With email, it's easier to be a jerk. With email, it's easy to be passive aggressive. That guy couldn't be a jerk to me when I was standing or sitting right in front of him, and we did resolve the matter. So just use electronic tools as appropriate. And don't fear the phone. So, do you like that? That's my childhood phone. I still have it. Yeah, so the reason I've added this to this talk is because people fear the use of the phone for speaking. They're like, I don't know if they're prepared, and they're receiving phone calls today or right now. I don't know. And speaking, they seem afraid. And it's not just teenagers. Adults are doing that too. I mean, in the old days, we didn't, drive down the street to see if our neighbor was receiving calls, right? We just picked up the phone and started talking. If they said, now's not a good time, okay. So it's important to remember the first use of our cell phones, which is for talking. Because when you can actually talk to someone, whether it's face-to-face or using the phone, you can resolve issues, and it decreases the likelihood you're going to be given the B word. So while people feel intimidated for some reason, even adults, in using the phone, I encourage you to use it to speak into it. It does resolve problems. It does take more courage to talk to somebody, either in person or on the phone, but it's effective. So don't fear the phone. Consider calling them if you're concerned they're not receiving calls at this time, and say something like, so Bob, I have a few things I want to cover with you. Is now a good time? Start with that, but don't fear the phone. Okay. Content. Last area. So the communications are received and understood through the subjective experience of the receiver, because the receiver determines the meaning of the message. So while you think you're saying one thing, they're hearing something else. What they're hearing is all that matters. So remember, it's through their experience that communication takes place. And I am going to provide you with sort of a script for being assertive but not aggressive. And of course, you'll tailor it to your own authentic self. So, Dr. Lois Frankel has a book called See Jane Lead, but the communication techniques are the same for men and for women. She suggests starting with a headline or main point, and then adding 3 supporting points and then adding inclusive language to get other people's point of view. So, an example, it might say, I called to talk to you about starting a new policy. And I say that we need a new policy for 3 reasons, and then you would give the 3 reasons, first, second, and third. And again, to avoid B-word labels, I suggest that you add inclusive language. Before making a decision, I'd like to get your input. So again, I want to do this, that's your tagline, 3, or perhaps you have 4 supporting points, and then that inclusion language. So by combining a strong statement with your supporting points and your inclusivity, inviting other people's points of view, you can assert yourself without having B-word labels. And that becomes easier with practice. And I apologize that this might be distracting with that PowerPoint, but I'm just going to continue on. So diffusing without disagreement. Whether it's email, phone, or in person, sometimes it's necessary just to bring the temperature down before you communicate. And I'll tell you, when I was a managing partner, oh good, we're back up and going. Yeah, we are. Okay. Yay, thank you. Okay, thank you. When I was managing partner, there was a male in my office who wanted that position, and the executive team, the national team, hired me instead. And he was going to test me. He thought, I'm going to make them understand they made the wrong choice. And he was trying to send me emails copied to all of the other Phoenix office and to get me to respond, which of course I wasn't because I take my hands off the keyboard. And so I was able to diffuse it. And without being disagreeable, but here's what I did. Bob, that's an interesting perspective, or a new perspective. Let's get the group together to discuss it. You'll notice I didn't either agree or disagree, I'm just responding. Now, he got angry, and so he sent a highly charged email, copied to the other partners, and I did not take the bait. Bob, seems like you're really passionate about this topic. Let's get the group together, right? And I said, after that, he sent another one, but the other partner said, knock it off, Bob. We have a meeting on Friday. We have better things to do, okay? So somebody else looked like the B word in that conversation. So you can diffuse a situation without agreeing with the other side. And here are some others. Bob, thank you for feedback and input. And just so you know, I did use that when I really didn't want that input. But you will minimize the chances of being a B word if you thank others for their feedback and input. And I said that as well in that particular one. Or, Bob, I appreciate that you've taken an interest in this topic. Bob, I appreciate the time you took to write this email. These are all can be tailored to your audience, etc. But I can tell you that if you use some of them, but perhaps not to the same people in this room, you'll find it's an effective way to diffuse a situation and not escalate it and avoid some B words. Okay, disagreeing without being disagreeable. Use reflective listening techniques. That's one that I've already covered. Start with the obvious points of agreement. I can tell you it is so much more effective to say, Bob, I agree with you on points 1, 4, and 5. Let's get together and discuss the others. When you do that, the other person's willing to listen. But if you just start off with, I disagree with you, they shut down and stop listening. Listen to other people's ideas before judging and criticizing. That's pretty obvious. Be open to compromise. Avoid all or nothing messages. I was taught as a lawyer, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. Remember, don't be a hog. So be open to compromise. Just remember that in your personal and professional life, pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. So constantly assess what you actually need, and maybe you strike out a middle ground for now. Determine in advance what you need for now. Disagree with the idea, don't attack the messenger. Turn I messages into organizational messages. So instead of saying, I want this, say, the organization would benefit if we did this. Just turn those messages around. And it helps frame it in a more effective way. Okay, last slide. Some strategic tips. Test drive your ideas. By convincing key stakeholders first, you'll influence them, and then when you get to the real meeting, they'll speak up and help you deliver your message effectively. So I cannot underestimate the power of going to key stakeholders, influence them first. And if they're not convinced, maybe you need to tailor your message or skip it for now, take it off the table and reframe it. And people always like to be of help, so you can ask them, hey, I want to run something by you. Pick your battles wisely. You're not, well, we are in Vegas, but you're not the house. So, your chips are limited. So know when it's worth to play them and when to hold them. Know when to stop picking a battle. Maybe you table it because there just isn't enough consensus in your favor. Again, the goal is to be effective, influential, and persuading. And if too many people are not happy with what's going on, consider taking it off the table. Be accessible and in touch. Don't be like that guy who has purge day on his emails. Because when you are reasonably accessible and in touch, you're able to effectively influence. There are people that I know that are never available, and that's not helpful either. Relationship orientation over task orientation, and by that I mean people in the nonprofit world talk about friend raising before fundraising. It's the same thing. Work on developing your relationships before asking anybody for anything. And resist measuring success in units of time. A lot of people say, oh, I didn't get my proposal passed. Well, wait a minute. Maybe you've opened the door, opened their minds to the idea, and maybe you'll do it in the future. That is success. So don't shut down and get angry and walk away. Understand that sometimes you just need to educate over time. Understand other people's motivation for a different point of view. That can happen. Sometimes it's power plays going on, but understand that as you make your decisions about what to say and when to say it. And admit when you're wrong. Saying, I'm sorry, I messed up, can go a long way to avoiding being called the B word. You know, sometimes you just need a do-over. So admit when you blew it. Own it. Okay. I'm going to end where I have with the last session. Again, remember, between stimulus and response, there is that space. And I hope that you will choose wisely and strategically. Now, I recognize that the strategies discussed won't cure all likelihood that you'll be called the B word. People in power want to stay in power, and they may fight you for it. But if you can balance your strength and style using some of these techniques and maybe some of these strategies, you may be more effective. You don't need to back down. Just be strategic and wise. And perhaps when enough of us model this behavior, things will change. But at least you'll minimize the chances of becoming or being called the B word. So I'll close with that. I know we're a little over time. Again, happy to get questions by email, by phone call. I don't do purge day. Thank you.